Everybody. Good morning. My name is Tom Cushing. I'm a Solutions Specialist in the VCPP team here at VMware. So like Nick, looking after cloud providers using VMware solutions. Part of my remit also is working with the team on the upcoming release of VMware Cloud on AWS. So that's what we're going to walk through today. From an interest point of view, this really speaks to, not only VMware, but where companies as a whole are moving towards in cloud, right? There's many different ways to consume cloud, and we know customers are going to want to move to that cloud native world, right? And obviously Amazon is the undisputed leader in those type of services. So the partnership, I think, really makes sense. We are very much an enterprise type solution. They're very much a public cloud solution. How can we bring both together and give some really good options to our customers and to your customers as a service provider? I'm also joined here by James Pickering. James, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning, everyone. James Pickering. I look after the managed service provider business here in region.
Great. So James, after I kind of go through what the service is, what the use cases are, James will follow up with more on the service provider specifics around how you guys could leverage this as a platform for your customers. With that, look, if there's questions, feel free, shout them out, put them in chat. Let's use this as an opportunity to keep some Q&A going as I move forward. All right. Everybody see the screen okay? Yeah, good. All right. So let's talk about what is VMware Cloud and AWS. And I touched on it earlier. We know at VMware, our customers are going to adopt public cloud in some way or another, right? A lot of the applications that have been running happily on VMware are targeted for replatforming, re-architecting in some way or another. Customers are going to go through a journey around, what Amazon famously calls the 6 R's, right? Things to replatform, rehost, rehome these applications. And so what we're looking to do is partner to give options across that spectrum. And in terms of what value it brings from a high level, we want to bring that same VMware stack that customers are using today, that consistency of tools and platform into the public cloud. And once it's there, give them extended access to consume AWS services, right? So, it's a hybrid cloud scenario, but literally bolted right next to each other. And we're going to talk through that here in a minute. So what is it? Ultimately, VMware Cloud on AWS, it is our entire software-defined data center, okay, delivered as a service and on demand. So I'm sure you've been through a lot of VMware sessions where we've talked about what our SDDC is, right? That's our software-defined storage, networking, compute, that whole SDDC stack. This is that stack delivered on top of AWS's bare metal EC2 infrastructure, okay? And so we're adopting AWS's on-demand, elastic capabilities there. For a long time, we've been telling our customers, move up that value chain, consume more automation, more software-defined, but it hasn't always been easy to deploy and use. This service is 100% built to spec by VMware engineers and built specifically to run on the AWS infrastructure. Now, we know customers aren't necessarily going to use it as an island. Most customers are going to have some on-premises environment today, likely VMware in some capacity or another, and they're using those tools, they're using those operational systems. And by having a similar platform in the public cloud, you can create a hybrid much easier, right? You can have consistency across your on-premises environment into the cloud and use the same tools and extend them into the public cloud without having to go through a huge transformation process. So that could be anything from our vRealize tools to maybe scripts or code that you've written toward managing your on-premises VMware environment. Those can be extended into the cloud. That's not where it ends, because obviously Amazon has a menu of something like 130 odd services. Now that VMware stack, and if those applications are moved onto VMware Cloud and AWS, they are sitting directly on the Amazon global infrastructure, right? So you have access into those native services to start rethinking applications, right? I don't necessarily have to do an either or decision. I could have some parts of my application running on VMware because that's the best platform for it, and some running as part of AWS directly tied together, okay, within the AWS global infrastructure. I'll get a little more detail on that in a moment. This is the high level, right? We want to have operational consistency, platform consistency from on-premises into the public cloud, allow customers to take advantage of public cloud economics of scale, on-demand pricing, and then consume future services as they grow. So use cases we see, a lot of times it is just capacity expansion, right? I want to consume the cloud as if it's just an extension of my own data center. And if it's another VMware footprint, I have compatibility, right? So I'm creating sort of a bubble extension. Perhaps maybe it's a data center evacuation scenario. Look, I'm running a data center. I've been, sweating these assets. I have a contract up for renewal. I don't want to go through the pain of selecting new hardware vendors and contracts. I just want to buy versus build, right? And so we have customers looking to us. How can I essentially take my entire data center and move to you guys and have you operate all that infrastructure, and I can just move forward with my applications. And then there's the classic dev test, seasonal type of use case. Look, I just need capacity for a certain amount of time. I just want to use it by the hour. Let me have a full SDDC stack to use for dev test, any other type of workloads. I just don't want to have to build that capacity into my on-premises. Let me just buy it as I need it from you guys. These are the key use cases we have currently. There are more coming as we develop the platform further. Things like DR, other sort of roadmap items, which we can touch on in a little bit here. Locality, right? So the million-dollar question is, when is it coming to Australia? So the official answer is Q3, which is not far away. I personally don't know exactly what that launch date is. I can imagine with VMworld coming up in Q3, I would expect something around that time. But we certainly are moving quickly. I mean, obviously, AWS is global. We leverage their global infrastructure to deliver our platform. Starting in the US, we've moved into Europe. GovCloud in the US just launched as well, just this past week or so. And so Sydney will be coming online very soon. In terms of how this is structured, okay, this is a VMware service. We're using AWS as our data center to deliver it, okay? We've come to the conclusion that VMware as a company, we focus on creating software, right? We're not really the best in the game at running global data centers at scale. I mean, AWS does that better than anybody. So this partnership allows us to use their infrastructure, use their tooling, things like CloudFormation automation, best-in-class hardware, global network reach, and security, inherit all of that goodness underneath the covers to deliver the best version of an SDDC that our engineers can build to spec, right? So if we know what that underlying infrastructure is, we can tailor and build, a very tight, coupled, and secure version of the SDDC. So all support goes through us. As a service provider, if you have a customer that you're supporting on top of the platform, they would go to you for level 1, and then you go to us for anything beyond that. But the point here is that it is a VMware owned and operated service. And that extends into how the world is divided between VMware and native AWS. So the VMware Cloud and AWS account, that is owned by us. That's where this SDDC will live, but it's linked into a native AWS owned account because you might want to consume other services, right? Those are not going to be built and managed through the VMware owned account. So the SDDC portion of it is all through us. We create the bill for you for that consumption, but anything outside of that, if you want to do other things with EC2 or S3, that would be in your own account. All right, let's get into the kind of nuts and bolts of it. So underneath the covers, it is AWS EC2 bare metal instances. And for up until recently, we were the only organization allowed access into this hardware. They've now gone GA with it for other applications. But this is bare metal servers, right? These are not nested hypervisors, some sort of strange hosting environment. No, this is part of their platform. And so what we're doing is we're grabbing 4 nodes to start with, so 4 ESX hosts, and using automation, we deliver the entire SDDC stack. So that's ESX, vSAN, NSX, the full software-defined data center, and we include everything from lifecycle management, all patching, updates, all that is maintained and managed by us. Okay, so as a customer, as a service provider, the platform, you don't have to worry about any of that. It's just you log in and start to consume. And because it's VMware, we bring all the native capabilities of VMware into AWS, things like adding extra hosts, right? Expanding the cluster, DRS, vMotion inside the host, right? All that stuff is there because it is a VMware platform. And if anything goes wrong, if there's a host that starts to show a sign of a failure, our operations teams will notice that. Because it's VMware, we can bring in a new host, evacuate your VMs, and you never know that there's a difference. Now, this is quite compelling and different than native AWS, which is you're designing for failure at the hardware level, right? Because AWS, they want you to put all that into your software code. So just moving a VM into AWS from VMware, you might likely lose all of your HA and load balancing capabilities if you don't build it the way AWS wants you to build it. Here, you can consume cloud and maintain your VMware footprint. And maybe it's a way to get started while you rethink what you do next. And because it is VMware, you still use the same VMware tools. So you go into this environment, you use vCenter, you see there are my 4 ESX hosts. There's nothing hidden. You see exactly what resources are there, what resources are available to you.
Hey, Tom, you mentioned what you do next. So thinking about the future, I have heard that this is not meant to be considered a stepping stone to AWS, right? If a partner wants to move from VMware to AWS, they just got to make that move. This is not a halfway point, right?
Yeah, look, this addresses really what customers are struggling with is like, look, I want to adopt cloud, but it's difficult, right? It's a different environment, different policies, different security. I mean, EC2 has been around since 2006. If customers were going to do it, they would have done it already, right? So both VMware and AWS absolutely see this as a joint solution. AWS specifically will not say this is this is a gateway to get into native AWS. What it is, it's a next step to get you closer into that cloud native model without forcing you to do the replatforming. If you want to replatform, you're going to do it one way or another. But for a lot of organizations who have a lot of investment and skill set in VMware, this gets you into the cloud without having to rebuild it all on day one.
We're hearing and we're getting good demand from our customers who are seeking access to the hyperscale cloud services, seeking access to all of the additional functions that AWS can bring in. But when they look at the proposals that they have for replatforming hundreds of applications, hundreds of VMs, the bills can be literally hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yep.
So this is a great way for organizations to bring in their existing environments into that cloud-based environment. There are multiple reasons why they would do that, but also leverage the existing functions and capacity and capabilities that they can get from AWS.
Yep.
Without changing all of their management, all their APIs, retraining all of their staff, et cetera.
Yep. Absolutely. And the last report I read on those Gartner or Tornado report, essentially, on average, it's 12 to 15 months per application for an enterprise to completely replatform it into a cloud native service. So that's compelling.
It's a lot of work just for the AWS cool brand.
It's cool, but it's about selecting the right service for the workload. Okay. Some other key points, right? It can help in other ways in terms of driving down total cost, right? Because if you're building a VMware solution on-prem, you're likely adding in buffer space, right? You're adding in extra hosts for that high watermark. Well, at AWS, it's essentially an infinite pool of resources, right? And because we're using automation and scripting, we can do things like add capacity very quickly. First and foremost, though, it's still VMware, so you can do things like oversubscription, right? That's not something you can do in these typical hyperscale cloud providers. So when you buy VMware Cloud and AWS, you can pack it as full as you possibly want and can within the capacity that you have, right? So you can start jamming VMs in there and not have to worry about, inefficient use of your resources. And I mentioned capacity on demand. If you need additional resources, if you start to grow or maybe you start to have a spike, another host is less than 10 minutes away, right? So with a push of a button, it's add my next host, expand my capacity, expand all my storage, my networking, all that can be added in about 10 minutes, okay? And I didn't say before, actually, I should have mentioned the entire platform initially takes less than 2 hours to stand up. Okay, you hit the go button, it's up and running in about 2 hours versus doing it on-prem with kind of a bespoke, maybe even using our professional services, that sometimes can take 3 to 4 months to do the full SDDC deployment. And then lastly, we're continuing to add new features and functionality. So another one coming in soon is called Elastic DRS. I always make the joke at this point, if we didn't have the word elastic somewhere in our naming, we really couldn't be a true partner of AWS. But it's quite simple, right? We're using things like AWS CloudWatch to monitor statistics on our platform, and if it needs to, take remediated action, right? So here we see maybe the storage starts to run hot. And one of these nodes, this is a hyper-converged infrastructure node, so the compute and the storage are uniform blocks. Add another block of a node to give me more storage, okay? And the solution will take care of that for you. So using the goodness of AWS to help make a better version of the SDDC. Speaking of AWS, for those familiar, AWS has this concept of an availability zone, okay? An availability zone is essentially a fault domain. When you deploy a VMware Cloud and AWS SDDC, it goes into a single availability zone, which is great because the VMware stack is highly available in itself, but you still have a potential fault domain of the AZ. We have just released now multi-AZ support, so this is stretch clustering across AZs. So imagine when we launch in Sydney, you can put it in Sydney Availability Zone A, Availability Zone B, and you can cross stretch, okay? So that's vSAN and NSX across these zones. So once again, we're using the best of AWS, bringing VMware tried and true, HADRS, things like that into the equation. So for here, you can see, I have logically a single cluster, but that cluster has a total of 6 hosts, right? Minimum for this configuration, 3 hosts on each side. And you can see, here they are, 3 hosts in 2A and 3 hosts in 2B, creating my stretch cluster, okay?
Can I jump in with a few questions?
Please.
Easy question to start out. Can you grow and shrink the cluster on demand, or is it only grow on demand?
Good question. So bare minimum to get started is 4 hosts, okay, for the service, for a single AZ. Okay, that really is to satisfy the HA requirements of vSAN, right? So you're going to have 4 hosts to start with currently, and then if you need to add a new host, no problem, you can add it. If you don't want it anymore, you can take it away back down to that 4 host minimum. And so you're billed on demand by the hour, okay? Everything is included, so all of your VMware licenses, support, maintenance, patching, upgrades, all included. So for customers that are dealing with their own VMware licensing schemes on premises, going into the cloud, it's just essentially, you rent it as you go.
Yeah, cool, thanks. Can we have direct connect into VMware AWS account?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not getting into those details here because you get kind of down the rabbit warren on the plumbing. But certainly VPN is easy to connect. There are direct connect options as well. Basically what happens is we run our encrypted tunnel through direct connect today. Down the track, it's going to be a much more native site-to-site over direct connect, supporting even more functionality.
Is that 10 gig connectivity? Do you know?
It's the direct connect that you get from Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah, we leverage the Amazon direct connect.
Cool. There was one more question that came through the chat, and I knew this was going to come up, and I warned you about it, man.
Okay.
vCloud Director on VMC on AWS. Can you make VMC multi-tenanted?
Yeah, so this is a good question, right? So a point here, currently this is a single tenant solution, okay? So it is a single vCenter, single stack. You cannot drop vCloud Director today on top of the stack. That said, we are taking a hard look at how we can leverage VMware Cloud and AWS as a multi-tenant solution specifically for service providers, right? So look, we get it. It is a chunky solution, right? It's 4 hosts. It's for a big customer. You're not going to run 20, 30 VMs in here. You're going to run 200, 300 VMs in the solution. So what we're seeing with service providers today is, look, I have a potential customer, or I have a customer, they're asking me for their own stack, their own single tenant. I don't want to be part of your other customers. This could be a way to quickly give them a solution that you manage but don't have to build yourself. But multi-tenancy is being looked at seriously in the roadmap.
Yeah, the other thing is, John Waite, you asked that question. So VMware is currently building a SaaS product that is a SaaS equivalent of vCloud Director. So I would imagine that is probably what will be used to make something like VMC multi-tenanted, rather than having vCloud Director actually sitting on top of it. Because like you mentioned, you don't get root log into the host, so you can't prepare them for vCloud Director. So in my mind, it makes more sense to have a SaaS-based vCloud Director making the VMC environment multi-tenanted. But that's kind of a wait and see thing down the track. These kinds of things are on the roadmap, and I'll be sure to update you through these calls in future.
Cool.
Sorry, Tom.
Good questions. To me, what's really compelling is that once you have that VMware footprint inside of AWS, you're right next to those native services. So, for customers who are doing things like dumping data into S3, reading data back out, maybe talking to other EC2 virtual instances, you can do that now securely within the AWS platform. And not just securely, you can do it potentially without having any data charges, right? Which is one of the biggest stumbling blocks for AWS, right? I put all this great capacity out there, but getting things in and out of it costs me an arm and a leg. Well, if you're within the same availability zone, let's say I put in my VMware Cloud and AWS next to where I have my S3, right there you can transfer data all day long and you're not going to be charged, okay? So there are options to start leveraging these services securely, directly, privately from VMware Cloud and AWS. And these integrations are just going to continue to grow. So, start to rethink and have options around, hey, look, I've got this application, my core enterprise application has been running on VMware forever. I'm going to leave it on VMware, but now, look, I'm going to front end it with some amazing web application firewall, auto scaling, type of front end. Maybe I dump data out to Redshift to do more data analytics, data warehousing, using those other services, things that as VMware, we're never going to build, right? So, truly creating kind of the best of both worlds here. Cool.
And you can peer with a AWS VPC?
Yes, you can.
So in there,
yep.
They're saying in other AWS accounts, which I assume means different admin accounts? Or?
Yeah, so look, we sit inside of a particular account, and so using native things like VPC peering, using your IAM roles, that sort of thing, you can interconnect us over. Now, it's still very AWS-centric on that side. You need to set up those services and make them available to us, but once they're there, we can consume them, right?
Sure.
And look, everything is still consumable. Sorry, I got timing on my slides. Everything is still consumable through the Amazon public endpoints. It doesn't mean you go out to the internet. It just means you're on their backbone hitting those public endpoints for their services as well.
Cool. So right now, the requirement is for a single customer AWS account and VPC to be peered with each instance for the service providers. So they actually need to peer each instance of VMware Cloud with a customer AWS.
And that's perfectly possible. There you just need to work within the boundaries of what AWS gives you. Cool. I'm going to move a little quicker here because I want to make sure, James, you've got plenty of time. One thing to consider, we have just released what we call the One Node Starter. So this is specifically for customers or service providers that want to do proof of value, proof of concept. It's a time-limited, 30-day, cost-reduced, sort of a sandbox environment. Okay, so it's a one node. So we've done some things to sort of, essentially get around the rules of, vSAN and HA, which means you would never use this for production, but you can, with a click of a button, expand it into a production environment. So great way, as your customer is saying, I want to try this out, help me do a proof of value. Well, let's do this with a minimal cost. And then from there, at the end of the day, you tick all the boxes. Great, I love it. Let's just take what we have and expand it into a production environment. That's certainly possible. Currently available in the US. When this launches on our instance here, I imagine the one node solution will be available as well.
And on that, 2-node solution I heard is in the roadmap. How else can we find out what's in the roadmap and what's...
Yeah, so I have some links at the end here. Good question. So we're very transparent with our roadmap, which is something unusual for both VMware and AWS. If you go to cloud.vmware.com, you can go to the VMware Cloud and AWS kind of page, and there's a roadmap and an FAQ. And the roadmap, it very specifically shows, what's being considered, what's actually in tech preview, what's gone GA on every dimension of the service, right? And it hasn't happened yet, but I believe we're going to be putting in kind of a voting system. So we want customers to provide feedback. We take the feedback seriously, straight back to the engineers to evaluate to include in the platform. Cool. I'm going to give just a quick demo here, if the gods of demo will work for me. Do I need to share this other screen? Yes.
So while we're getting that set up, I'll just make a comment. While VMC on AWS is not currently available in Australia or New Zealand, it is available in other regions already, and we do have Australian service providers spinning up instances in London, let's say.
Correct.
One as production, mostly as demo. So you can actually get started with using a real instance of VMC on AWS now. It just won't physically be located in Sydney. So if you are interested in that, just reach out to us and we can help you get set up.
Cool. So this is a kind of a demo environment. It's the entire user interface code, but it's running in a sandbox, right? So it's a little bit of a click through, but it gives you exactly the same look and feel of VMware Cloud and AWS. So let me log in here. First things first, this gives me to a landing page where you see a lot of tiles here. I'm sure you've heard from other presentations, VMware is quickly, quote unquote, SaaSifying many of our offerings, right? And it's all coming through this VMware Cloud, right? That's the whole branding, right? So we see a lot of things here that are coming out of the scope of this conversation. One thing down here, usage meter service. I think we've done a little bit of discussion around that. That's going to become a SaaS offering. We're doing some early access to that. So you're going to see a lot more things being delivered by cloud services, moving away from just perpetual. And these are services that you as a service provider are going to be able to resell to your customers. Oh, and of course my demo gods are.
It looks like we were trying to make the homepage as confusing as the AWS service catalog, but yeah. I don't think we got there.
Yeah, let me sign back out and back in. That's lovely. We may have to resort to screenshots if somebody went into our environment and had to play. Jesus. Okay, guys. Oh, sorry about that. So yeah, I think somebody had to play in my lab here. Look, that's embarrassing. Let's do this. Let's pivot.
It wouldn't be a live demo if it worked.
That's true.
I trusted if it worked.
Yeah. Give me a moment, guys. Yeah, I took my chances on that one, didn't I? Let's do this.
So John is keen to know if in future portability between regions is planned or likely, e.g. move a US West cluster to Australia when the Australian instance is available.
Yeah, look, I mean, that's going to be in the VMware migration tools. As far as I'm aware, there's not necessarily a option to just, hey, pick this up and move it all over. I'm going to talk on a little bit of the migration stuff here in a moment. So those are great ideas, and I would love to see us make it much more seamless. Like the way you can take an AMI, right, of AWS and say, oh, just copy this to another region, right? That's a good thought, and I'll see where that might be.
Would that be an HCX use case?
Potentially, I'll touch on that. Look, guys, I'm just going to do this offline. So, essentially, this is for a demo I did for a security company called Gemalto. Once you stand up your VMware Cloud in AWS, you get your core 4 hosts, right? And that gives you an aggregate number of CPU gigahertz, memory, and storage, okay? These are hyper-converged infrastructure nodes, right? So think vSAN ready nodes. They're uniform blocks. So if I need to increase my storage, I add a new host, right? If I need to increase my memory, I add a new host. Okay, that's how it scales. So if I need to add a host, it's as simple as clicking this button. I see here, my current number of hosts is 4. I can add another host, and you can see these hosts are quite beefy, right? They are 2-socket. 36 core, half a terabyte of RAM, about 10 terabytes of SSD storage per host, right? So, you can start to scale this as you need for additional capacity. Moving over to network, the way we segment the platform is the customer has access to their own sort of compute area, and then VMware runs the management side. So with that, there are 2 different gateways. There's a compute gateway and then a management gateway. So here's where you configure all those options. And essentially what this is doing is working with NSX under the covers. Okay, so it abstracts away all the NSX complexity and allows you to configure your connectivity, your firewall rules, and this sort of stuff. Okay. Now you can use the GUI, but certainly this is a cloud service. We like APIs, so it's fully API accessible. There's a developer center here. You can do things like check your code. There's examples for download. We definitely want to encourage more programmatic use of the platform. And like I said, it is VMware, so things like vCenter, you click the link and it opens up the vCenter console, right? This is a single tenant instance, so you have a dedicated vCenter to you. And this is, that VMware platform in the cloud that you can use now to link back to your on-premises VMware. And that's a good segue here into the last little section. It's, okay, well, how do you do that, right? So within VMware Cloud and AWS, we have what's called hybrid link mode. Essentially, you can interlink the vCenter sitting on VMware Cloud and AWS back to your on-premises, right? So you can manage both environments through the same VMware console. Now, this overcomes a big issue, which is SSO domains, right? We talk about doing enhanced link mode and cross vCenter, but it requires the SSO domain is all the same, right? You've got to build it at the same time. Well, that's just not possible if we're building a cloud service. So hybrid link mode abstracts away that SSO domain difference in the stacks, okay? And with that, you can use vCenter to start moving your workloads using vMotion, right? So you can do hot migrations. And if you do something like, say, put NSX in the mix, you can do stretch networking and hot migrations this way. But actually doing hot migrations through hybrid link mode is not the best way. We have what we call hybrid cloud extension. Okay. Hybrid cloud extension comes with the platform. It allows us to use NSX essentially to create a software-defined interconnect, okay, and stretch networks from on-premises into the cloud. And then it has migration capability both with replication and with live migrations. This is literally vMotioning into the cloud. So imagine this, I have my production networks on premises, I can stretch them into the cloud, I can now vMotion hot running applications, they land on the same network on the other side. It's as if nothing has ever changed, right? quite compelling when we talk about that use case of extension into cloud. I want to consume it like it's my own data center, and that includes my network security. Okay, so I can move that application over, and those 1,000 firewall rules, I don't have to change a thing, correct? Because the IP address, nothing changed. All right, so we want to reduce the friction for migrating into the service. It is a many-to-one option for HCX, so you can have multiple on-premises environments going to VMware Cloud and AWS, or vice versa, okay? Which is different from hybrid link mode, which is a one-to-one. So really think of hybrid link mode just for management, but hybrid cloud extension is for network connectivity and for migration. And just here's a simple visual, I have hybrid link, HCX going between my on-premises data center to VMware Cloud and AWS. And you can see here, I've migrated a virtual machine and there's 0% packet loss, right? Same IP address as it moved from on-premises into the cloud. Okay, so this is vMotion directly to the cloud. Okay, I'm going to round out here with a little bit of fun stuff around security. VMware Cloud and AWS, it is a cloud platform. I think we've all understand the shared security model. It just means we as VMware and AWS together are going to manage everything from the data center up to the hypervisor. The customer, or potentially the service provider on behalf of the customer, is going to manage the workloads on top of that. Okay. So we inherit all the data center security, all the best practices of AWS to build our platform and then hand that off to the customer. And that's important because the customer is going to share the environment with us as managers, right? So we are going to manage things like vCenter, NSX, all those behind the scenes components. The customer is going to manage everything they put into the compute workload. The key here is customers are not going to be able to get under the covers into root access of the hypervisors, right? So you can do anything you want to do in guest or through services we provide, but you're not going to be able to go in and have full access, right? Because you just can't do that in a cloud model. Which is why we have partners, right? Service provider partners, ISV partners. We want to be using APIs. We want to be using, modern access methods to provide services. So we're working with all of our core partners here to make sure that they're certified for VMware Cloud and AWS. It's just a matter of getting them out of the old habit of putting agents down into the hosts and putting plugins into vCenter. And James, I'm going to start transitioning over to you for the last bit here. And really what we want to stress is VMware Cloud and AWS, it's a platform, right? It's a platform for either customers to use on their own, but more importantly, a platform for service providers to leverage to provide services on top of. And that doesn't just mean IaaS, right? Because what comes with that is all these other opportunities to do things like assessments, migrations, costing, strategy to help your customers consume the platform and higher level key services, right?